I watched my husband step onto my yacht with another woman on his arm. He had no idea the luxury ship he was showing off on. I owned every inch of it. The crew? They all answered to me, and I was about to teach him the most expensive lesson of his life. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this story gets wild. Drop a comment if you've ever caught someone in a lie they couldn't escape. Now let me tell you how this all went down. My name is Gabrielle Thompson, and 10 years ago, I was a deckhand scrubbing boat floors at a marina in Charleston. Today, I own Thompson Maritime Luxury, a fleet of 5 luxury yachts that wealthy people rent for anywhere from $50,000 to $200,000 a week. Yeah, you heard that right. I built this from absolutely nothing. Just me, my determination, and a dream that people laughed at when I was still working double shifts just to make rent. I met my husband, Kevin, back when I was still climbing. He was charming, supportive, always telling me I could do anything I set my mind to. We got married 8 years ago in a small ceremony by the water. Back then, he was working in sales, doing okay for himself, and I was just starting to save money for my first boat. He'd hold me at night and tell me that one day we'd make it big together. I believed him. I believed in us. But here's the thing about building an empire while you're married. You don't always notice when your partner stops climbing with you and starts riding on your coattails instead. Kevin's sales job never really took off. Within 3 years of our marriage, I bought my first yacht. A smaller one, sure, but it was mine. I named it Perseverance, because that's what it took to get there. I worked that boat myself, captained it, cleaned it, marketed it. Meanwhile, Kevin's career kind of stalled. He bounced from job to job, and eventually, he started helping with my business. Helping, meaning he'd answer phones sometimes, or meet clients for drinks on my dime. I didn't mind at first. Marriage is partnership, right? When one person is up, you lift the other. But somewhere along the way, Kevin started acting like my success was his success. He'd tell people at parties about our company, about our boats. He started dressing better, driving the car I bought, wearing the watch I gave him for our anniversary. And slowly, so slowly, I almost didn't notice, he started pulling away from me. The signs were all there. I just didn't want to see them. Late nights, where he'd say he was networking. Phone calls, he'd take in another room. The way he'd tilt his screen away when I walked past. And then there was the perfume. A scent I'd never worn, clinging to his collar when he'd come home at midnight, claiming he was at a business dinner. I'm not stupid. I'm a Black woman who built $1 million business from scratch. You don't get here by being naive. But I also loved my husband, and love makes you give people the benefit of the doubt way longer than you should. 3 months ago, everything came crashing down. I picked up Kevin's iPad one morning because mine was charging. Just wanted to check my emails before heading to the marina. He'd forgotten to log out of his messages, and there it was, weeks of texts with a woman named Brittany, calling her baby, making plans, telling her how beautiful she was, how he couldn't wait to see her again. My hands shook as I scrolled through months of lies. There were pictures too. Her sitting in restaurants I recognized, wearing jewelry that looked expensive, real expensive. The kind of expensive that I was funding. But the message that made my blood run cold was from 2 weeks prior. Kevin had written, "I'm planning something special for us. A weekend getaway you'll never forget. Luxury yacht, private chef, just you and me on the ocean. I've got connections, baby. I'll show you how the other half lives. My yacht." He was planning to take his mistress on one of my yachts. I sat there in our bedroom, the same bedroom where we'd talked about building a life together, and I felt something shift inside me. Not just heartbreak, not just anger, something colder, something calculated. I opened my company's booking system on my phone and searched the dates he'd mentioned to Brittany. Sure enough, there it was. A reservation for our largest yacht, the Majesty, booked under the name Kevin Richardson, not Kevin Thompson. He'd used his last name, the one he'd kept when we got married because I'd kept mine for business purposes. That's when I realized something that almost made me laugh. Kevin had booked this yacht through our public website. He'd paid the 50% deposit with a credit card that I paid the bills on. He had absolutely no idea that the luxury yacht company he was using to impress his mistress was owned by his wife. See, I'd built Thompson Maritime under my maiden name. All the paperwork, all the legal documents, the website, everything said Thompson Maritime Luxury, founded and operated by Gabrielle Thompson. Kevin knew I owned a yacht company, obviously, but he'd never paid enough attention to know the actual name of it, never looked at the details, never cared enough to learn the business that was funding his entire lifestyle. And in that moment, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him, not yet. I was going to let him take Brittany on that yacht. I was going to let him play out his fantasy of being a rich, powerful man with connections. And then, when he was floating on my boat, drinking my champagne, sleeping in my sheets, I was going to walk out and introduce myself. I called my captain, Andre, a man who'd been with me since I bought my second yacht. Andre was 62, had been sailing since he was 14, and was fiercely loyal. When I told him what was happening, there was a long silence on the phone. Then he said, "Miss Gabrielle, just tell me what you need." I laid it out simply. Treat Kevin and Brittany like regular VIP guests. Give them the full luxury experience. Don't mention me at all. Act like you don't know Kevin is married. And most importantly, don't tell them the owner will be on board. The Majesty has private owner's quarters, completely separate from the guest areas, with its own entrance. I'd stay there, watching everything through the security system we have in all common areas. Legal, by the way. Every guest signs a waiver about security cameras in shared spaces. Andre was quiet for a moment, then said, "It's going to hurt, watching that." I told him I knew, but I needed to see it. I needed to know the truth of who my husband really was. And honestly, part of me needed to see him dig his own grave before I buried him in it. The weekend arrived. I'd told Kevin I had to fly to Miami for a supplier meeting. He'd kissed my cheek at the door that Friday morning, told me to have a safe trip, and said he'd probably just hang out at home, maybe catch up with some friends. I drove to the airport, parked in long-term parking, then took an Uber straight back to the marina. I boarded the Majesty 3 hours before Kevin's scheduled arrival time and locked myself in the owner's suite. The owner's quarters on the Majesty are something else. Full bedroom, bathroom, with a soaking tub, a small kitchenette, and a living area with monitors connected to every camera on the ship. I'd designed it this way so I could check on operations when I was on board without disturbing guests. Now I was about to use it to watch my marriage fall apart in real time. At 2 p.m., I saw them on the dock camera. Kevin strutted up the gangway like he owned the place, wearing the designer blazer I'd bought him for Christmas. And her, Brittany. She was younger than me, maybe 27 or 28. Blonde hair, sundress, oversized sunglasses, pulling a designer suitcase. She was pretty, I'll give her that. The kind of pretty that turns heads. She was giggling, holding on to Kevin's arm, looking up at the yacht like she'd never seen anything like it. I watched Kevin shake hands with Andre, playing the part of the successful gentleman. I couldn't hear them yet, but I could read his body language. Chest puffed out, big gestures, probably talking about his business and how he'd managed to secure this incredible vessel. Andre's face was perfectly neutral, professional. He welcomed them aboard and gestured for the crew to take their luggage. I switched to the main deck camera and turned on the audio. That's when I heard Kevin's voice, clear as day, saying, "Yeah, I've known the owner for years. Called in a favor to get us this beauty on such short notice. She's 40 meters, fully staffed, top of the line everything." Brittany gasped, "Baby, this is incredible. You really do know everyone, don't you?" My husband, my lying husband, smiled and said, "When you work hard and build the right connections, doors open. I want to give you the world, Brittany. You deserve it." I sat back on the couch in my suite and took a deep breath. It was one thing to read texts. It was another thing entirely to watch him lie so smoothly, so confidently. This wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. This was calculated. He'd been living a double life, and he was good at it. The first evening was almost too much to bear. The crew served them dinner on the upper deck as we cruised along the coast. Champagne, lobster, the works. Kevin ordered the most expensive bottle we had in stock, a $1,000 vintage that I'd been saving for special clients. He told Brittany it was his favorite, like he was some kind of sommelier. She ate it up, literally and figuratively. Every lie he told, she believed. Every time he touched her hand across the table, I felt a piece of my heart harden. But what really got me was when they started talking about me. I'd switched to the hot tub camera, where they'd gone after dinner. They were drinking more champagne, sitting close, and Brittany asked the question I'd been waiting for. "So when are you going to tell her, your wife?" Kevin sighed, like this was such a burden for him. "Soon," he said. "I'm just waiting for the right moment. She's so wrapped up in her little boat business, she barely notices me anymore anyway. Honestly, Brittany, I've been unhappy for years. But I'm a loyal guy. I wanted to make it work. But you make me feel alive again. My little boat business. The business that paid for everything he touched. The business that was currently floating his cheating behind in the middle of the ocean." I wanted to storm out right then, but I held back. I needed to hear it all. Brittany cuddled closer to him. "What about money? I mean, in a divorce, won't she take everything?" Kevin laughed, actually laughed. "That's the thing, baby. Everything we have is in both our names. The house, the cars, the accounts. I've been smart about it. When we split, I'll get half of everything, maybe more if I play it right. And then you and me, we can start fresh. I might even buy us a yacht like this one." That's when I knew he wasn't just cheating. He was planning to leave me and take half of everything I'd built, everything I'd worked for. The only problem, he was wrong. Dead wrong. When I'd started Thompson Maritime, my lawyer had advised me to keep the business completely separate from my marriage. Prenup, separate accounts, everything. Kevin had signed it all without reading it carefully, because back then, I had nothing. He never imagined I'd become this successful, and legally, he had no claim to my company or its assets. I watched them for 2 more days. Every moment was torture, but I needed to see the full picture. Kevin got more comfortable, more arrogant. He snapped at one of my servers, a young woman named Trinity, who'd worked for me for 3 years, because his eggs weren't cooked exactly the way he liked them. Brittany complained that the towels weren't soft enough. They treated my crew like servants, like people beneath them. Meanwhile, the crew kept looking at the cameras, knowing I was watching, waiting for my signal. On the final evening, Andre came to my suite. "Ms. Gabrielle," he said quietly, "Captain's dinner is tonight. It's time." Captain's dinner is a tradition on luxury yacht charters. On the last night, the captain hosts a formal dinner with the guests. It's elegant, prestigious, a final touch of class before the trip ends. I'd told Andre that this dinner was when I'd make my appearance. I got dressed carefully, a white pantsuit that I'd had custom made in Italy, gold jewelry, my hair pulled back elegantly. I looked like exactly what I was, the owner of a multi-million-dollar company. I looked like power, and as I checked myself in the mirror, I felt something settle in my chest. Not anger anymore, just certainty. Clarity. I walked into the main dining room at exactly 8 p.m. Andre had gathered Kevin and Brittany at the table, told them the owner wanted to personally thank them for choosing Thompson Maritime. Kevin was in a suit, looking pleased with himself, probably thinking he'd get to network with some rich boat owner. Brittany was in a cocktail dress, all smiles. The moment I stepped through the door, Kevin's face went white, and I mean completely colorless. Like he'd seen a ghost. His mouth opened, then closed. His hand, which had been holding a glass of wine, started shaking. Brittany looked confused, glancing between us, trying to understand why her boyfriend suddenly looked like he was about to pass out. I smiled, not a warm smile, the kind of smile that says, "I know everything, and you're finished." I walked slowly to the head of the table and said, in the calmest voice I could manage, "Good evening. I'm Gabriel Thompson, owner and CEO of Thompson Maritime Luxury. Welcome aboard my yacht." The silence that followed was deafening. Brittany's confusion turned to shock as she processed what I'd said. Kevin couldn't form words. He just sat there, frozen, like if he didn't move, maybe this wasn't real. I pulled out a chair and sat down, crossing my legs, completely in control. "I hope you've enjoyed your stay," I continued. "The Majesty is my flagship vessel. 40 meters, as you noted, Kevin. Top of the line everything. I designed much of the interior myself when I had her built 3 years ago. That champagne you've been drinking, I selected that vintage personally. The crew you've been, let's say, less than kind to? They've worked for me for years. They're family." Brittany found her voice first. "Wait, you're his wife," I finished. "Yes, 8 years married, though I suppose Kevin forgot to mention that part during your romantic getaway." Kevin finally spoke, his voice cracking. "Gabby, I can explain." I held up my hand. "No, Kevin, you really can't. See, I've been here the entire time, the owner's suite, right below where you've been sleeping. I've watched everything, heard everything. The lies you told Brittany about knowing the owner, about your connections, about being successful. The things you said about me in the hot tub, about leaving me and taking half of everything I've built." I leaned forward. "But here's the thing, baby. You signed a prenup. My business is mine. The house is in my name. The cars are in my name. Everything you think you have, it's mine. You've been living off of my money for 5 years, and you didn't even realize it." Brittany stood up suddenly, her face red. "You told me you were separated. You said—" She turned to Kevin, and I actually felt a moment of sympathy for her. She was a victim of his lies too, just in a different way. Kevin tried to stand, to say something. But Andre stepped forward from where he'd been standing by the door. "Sir, I think it's best if you sit back down and listen." I pulled out my phone and set it on the table. "I've already contacted my lawyer. Divorce papers will be filed Monday morning. I've also documented every penny you've spent on this affair using my credit cards, my money. You've been booking hotels, buying gifts, dinners, all on accounts that I fund. That's marital misconduct, Kevin, and it's going to cost you." Kevin's shock was turning to anger. I could see it in his face. "You can't just— This is insane. You spied on me. You set me up." "I documented the truth," I corrected. "Every guest signs a waiver about security cameras in common areas. You signed it when you booked. And I didn't set you up. You did this yourself. You booked a yacht through a company you never bothered to learn anything about because you were too busy pretending to be someone you're not." Brittany grabbed her purse. "I can't. I need to get off this boat. Now." She looked at me, tears in her eyes. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know he was married." I believed her. "Andre will arrange for you to be taken ashore at the next port. We'll be there in 2 hours." I looked at Kevin. "You too, both of you, off my yacht, out of my life." Kevin slammed his hand on the table. 8 years, Gabby. Doesn't that mean anything to you? The audacity of this man. The absolute nerve. I stood up, and when I spoke, my voice was ice. It meant everything to me. "I loved you. I built a life with you. I shared my dreams with you, and worked myself to exhaustion to make them real. And you used me. You lied to me. You disrespected me, my business, and my crew. You brought another woman onto my yacht and bragged about wealth that you didn't earn. So no, Kevin, those 8 years don't mean anything anymore. You made sure of that." We docked at Marina Bay 2 hours later. I had Andre call ahead to have a boat ready to take Kevin and Brittany to shore. They packed in silence. Brittany left first, couldn't even look at either of us. Kevin tried one more time at the gangway. "Gabby, please, can we just talk? I made a mistake, a huge mistake, but we can fix this." I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt nothing. No love, no anger, just emptiness where he used to be. The only mistake was mine, I said. I mistook your support for partnership. I mistook your presence for love. But I won't make that mistake again. Goodbye, Kevin. I watched him walk down the gangway, his shoulders slumped, carrying the bag I'd bought him. He looked small, diminished, nothing like the man who'd strutted onto my yacht 3 days ago. And I felt something I didn't expect. Relief. Pure, clean relief. The divorce was quick. The prenup was ironclad, and Kevin's lawyer couldn't find a single loophole. He tried to claim he'd contributed to the business, but I had years of documentation showing otherwise. He tried to say he deserved compensation for supporting me, but our marriage counseling records from 2 years ago, sessions I'd pushed for when I noticed him pulling away, showed that even then he'd admitted he wasn't involved in the business. In the end, he walked away with almost nothing. The car he'd been driving, leased in my company's name, the watch, the clothes, all gifts that legally remained mine. He left our marriage with less than he'd entered it. I kept the house, I kept my business, I kept my dignity, and I kept moving forward. That's what I do. That's what I've always done. Trinity, the server Kevin had snapped at, got a promotion. Andre got a bonus for handling everything with such professionalism. And I threw a party for my crew, thanking them for their loyalty during the most difficult weekend of my life. People ask me sometimes if I regret how I handled it, if I wish I'd just confronted Kevin privately, ended it quietly. And my answer is always the same: number. Because he needed to see it. He needed to stand on my yacht, surrounded by my success, and realize that everything he thought he had was actually mine. He needed to understand that the woman he underestimated, the woman whose little boat business he dismissed, was the same woman who'd been 10 steps ahead of him the entire time. I still own Thompson Maritime Luxury. We've actually expanded. I just bought a 6th yacht last month, and I'm dating again, taking it slow, learning to trust. But this time, I'm smarter. This time, I know my worth. And I'll never again let someone make me feel small while standing on the empire I built. Sometimes the best revenge isn't fire and fury. It's ice-cold truth. It's walking into a room and showing someone exactly who you are and what you're capable of. It's watching their face as they realize they never really knew you at all. Kevin texted me 6 months after the divorce, said he was sorry, that he'd made the biggest mistake of his life, asked if we could meet for coffee. I blocked his number, not out of anger, out of indifference. He's a chapter that's closed, a lesson learned, and I've got new waters to navigate. Sometimes the best revenge is simply owning what's already yours. If this story taught you anything, drop a yes in the comments. Smash that like button if you love seeing cheaters get caught. And subscribe, because I've got more stories that'll blow your mind. What would you have done in my situation? Let me know below. Remember, never underestimate a Black woman who built her empire from nothing. Never underestimate anyone who turned their pain into power. I'll see you in the next one.